Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Steven, and I want to welcome you all here. This space is built for your voice, your question, and your lived experience. Tonight, we're joined by Oregon Governor candidate Tristan Sheppard for an open and respectful conversation about Oregon's prison and justice system. Far too often, the people most impacted by these policies are the ones... Oh, what is going on? Oh, anyways, my bad. There was another audio in the background. Joined by Tristan Sheppard for an open and respectful conversation about Oregon's prison and justice systems. Far too often, the people most impacted by these policies are the ones least heard. This Q&A is an open opportunity to change that. As always, we'll keep this space grounded in respect, clarity, and purpose. Ask the questions that matter to you. Share the concerns that deserve to be heard. This is your platform, your community, and your chance to speak directly to someone seeking to lead our state. Thank you all for showing up, for standing together, and for the continuing to push for accountability, dignity, and real change. Let's get started. All right, Tristan, we'll put you on. Hi, Tristan. So I had a little background audio there for a second. We're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube, and people are going to join hopefully this time. How about give a little bit of a background of who you are and why you're running for governor in Oregon?
Okay, so my name is Tristan Sheppard. I am currently on the Democrat ticket for the primaries, but I'm not running as solely a Democrat. I'm running to hopefully, bring unity to Oregonians. I feel like status quo is kind of not beneficial to most of us, and we can't continue with dealing with extremes. So I want to give everybody the opportunity, as well as myself, to continue serving and give a candidate that's willing to
Thank you.
serve and be there for their community versus mostly larger corporation interests.
Okay, thank you. When nobody's asking questions yet, but I do have a list of questions to ask. I got some from currently incarcerated individuals within the Oregon Department of Corrections. So one question that they're asking is, at some point, will the parole board in the near future go away, or at least change how it's being run now? So I'm not for sure if you know much about the parole board. So before, under the old guidelines, individuals were able to go to parole board after so much time of their sentence is completed and go in front of them to see if the state thinks that they're rehabilitated enough to come back into society.
Well, that particular answer, just with how it's framed, is kind of hard to say because I wouldn't be elected to first actually have a say in that. But I do know that I'm hopeful for prison reform, because a lot of those systems that we have in place are outdated, and rules were different. So just like anything else, we have to evolve. But I would hope that parole boards should definitely be able to change with the times.
It's kind of hard to hear you, Tristan.
Oh, sorry.
You keep fading in and out.
Okay. I'll start over. I said that it would be hard to actually give that particular answer or question and answer with how it was framed. I would need to actually, be elected or in a position to have say of how the parole board is ran. But I'm hopeful that we're able to bring reform, because it's needed. It's a outdated system for the most part. A lot of these rules and laws were made when they were needed, and they haven't necessarily changed with the times, unless there's an executive order, a bill's passed, or there is a voters measure that goes through with it.
Okay, that makes sense. So another one from the insight is, if you become governor, will you create a clemency bill such as the one that Governor Brown made for the juvenile lifers, which allows them to see a parole board when they have completed 50% of their sentence or at least 15 years, whichever comes first? And then it goes on and says, could something like this be done for non-juveniles lifers who see the board at 25 years, such as first-time offenders, for example, letting them see the board when they have completed around 17 to 20 years of their sentence?
Yeah, I'm all for willing, I'm willing to listen to the facts, and I know that a lot of that's going to be a case by case. I don't believe in blanket policies across the board because there are a lot of different variables, but I would definitely be willing to have some clemency and leniency for, especially, let's say, for example, people that have been, they have a mandatory sentence of 25 years or something from issues like Measure 11. So, yeah, I'd say there's some potential, depending on how long you've been there, and I would definitely want the facts of the case before I make any actual judgments.
Okay, so a question from Rhonda. She's saying it's kind of hard to hear your answers, which I don't know if it's because where you're at or what, but it is still a little hard to understand. But her question is about diabetic insulin pumps to the adults in custody that need them, and if there's anything she can do as a mother to help the influence for the insulin pumps within DOC.
Well, whenever there's an adult in custody, we definitely need to be doing what we can to take care of them. And I feel like insulin pumps and things like that would be essential care. So it shouldn't have to go on the family to provide issues and services like that. So that would definitely be on my radar as far as prison reform, because it needs to go into cares as well and not just time served and how operations work.
Okay. A question from Wesley says, what are you going to do about the homeless with people coming out of prison? So it's like the pipeline, the school to prison pipeline. And then when people get out of prison, a lot of them end up homeless because they can't get adequate housing or adequate jobs to hold housing. And so it goes back into that cycle of repeat offenses to, end up back in prison. So what as governor could you do to help those that are coming out from potentially being homeless?
Yeah, and homelessness is a big issue across the entire state. I can see how it's going to be harder for somebody just coming out of prison to rent unless you find somebody with a good heart and they're willing to listen and hopefully not judge. But things that I would like to do is actually have specific community homes and stuff like that available, whether it be make sure that things are easily permitted and just pathways and systems in place to ensure that we don't fall back into letting people go and then just leaving them to the system. Part of that is going to be with ensuring that we have rehabilitation, so that way there's a lot of skills that come out of being in prison. And then back to housing in specific, in particular, we need a matter of supply because the demand's there. So even if that's specific housing that's in place, just to ensure that maybe that could be a checkoff thing for parole board and probation officers to ensure that there's stable housing while people are in that transition period.
Yeah, which is hard to do. Stable housing. There's some like homeless shelters that people go to, but that's not stable. There needs to be more housing that's less strict on the felony mark on your background, because that's the main issue, is that felony is hindering even jobs, let alone housing.
Absolutely. Yeah, there needs to be more, I don't want to say halfway homes, but just to get that point across, there needs to be more homes and places for people to stay while they're trying to get back their life.
Yeah, even something like transitional housing, when they get out, go there. And then when you get on your feet and you can afford to get housed, your housing on your own. But there's not even that for people that are getting out.
No, and that needs to change. There needs to be a transitional housing thing where, we're not just going to let you go and hope you do your best. We need to make sure that we are releasing people and they are comfortable with working in society.
Yeah, I agree. So the next question comes from Christy. What does his envision in a perfect world, the incarceration system, look like? What would you change?
Well, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need it. But what I would change is I would like to see more transparency and accountability from, staff as well as public requests, and then also some of the conditions. And ideally, we, get bigger prisons that don't have to house as many people, and even just basic essential needs are cared for. So, things that I would specifically change would just be I'd like to see, the prison board accountable to elected officials, or a board that's not necessarily connected to the prison system directly and more outside of it.
Yeah, so like an independent oversight of the prison. Yes. Gotcha. Let's see. So Rhonda comes back with, yes, agreed, but they are not allowed and his body makes no insulin. He has had one for 2 years before going in. So that's back to the insulin pump. So her loved one that's on the inside is having issues of getting the adequate amount of insulin. And DOC is playing this pushback game of not allowing him to have a pump. So I guess that falls under, better medical treatment. And how could we?
It definitely would fall under better medical treatment. So my background is I have my EMT. So when it comes to emergency response, I don't care what your background is or what you might have done. I'm going to respond no matter what. And I feel like people are entitled to their health care, their basic treatment. Insulin pumps would be a necessary thing, so it's not something that should just be dismissed.
Yeah. So Debbie is asking, even when they have housing, they're told they cannot go there and still homeless. So what that is when before you're released, the parole officer comes in, or you fill out some paperwork and you put in like where you're going to go stay, right? But then they can deny that house due to whatever circumstances the parole officer is saying.
So the parole officer can deny the house, or the people that have the house can deny it?
So let's just say that I'm releasing, and I was releasing to, say, my parents' house, right? The parole officer can deny that because they didn't meet certain standards, within the house.
Well, I think that we could definitely go with reworking some of those standards, because yes, we definitely need to make sure that people are being released into stable housing, but they also need to be in an environment that they are able to thrive and not just go back into the systems. So I would say that if housing is denied, there definitely needs to be a clear reason as to why, and then potentially have a fallback location that's available, whether it be a state provided transitional house or another place is able.
Yeah. So Tamara says, along with on the line of insulin pumps, shoes for the adults in custody, commissary doesn't have their needed size or width. How do you feel about letting families send these in if needed?
I don't
So
have an
right,
issue with it.
so right now with DOC is medical can approve certain individuals to have medical shoes, but the shoes that are on Canteen are like the bottom of the barrel, even though that they're Nikes or whatever other brand they sell, they're the bottom that they can't sell in the stores. So would you, under your eyes, would you allow families to send needed items into DOC?
Well, yeah, of course. Anything that somebody sends, it's going to go through a rigorous process. They're going to definitely verify that it's safe to have and everything like that. I don't have any issues with that. If somebody needs a new pair of shoes because the old ones are falling apart and bare seams, hopefully, it's not the family doesn't feel like they have to replace the shoes, but that possibility should definitely be there and not just tossed to the wind.
Yeah. Erica wants to know about proper care for the women's prison with maintaining child and family preservation.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that maintaining child and family preservation? Just so that way I can give a good response.
Okay. Erica, can you put more info of that in the chat, and then we'll come back to you? Debbie says, my husband's friend was sent to a recovery center and wasn't even in prison for drugs. So I guess what she's saying would be, I don't know. Debbie, can you elaborate a little bit on what that is? Because it doesn't make sense of sending somebody to a recovery center if they had no drug history. Priscilla wants to know, what about more programming for AICs, especially needed for those to go in at a young age? It also helps keep the AICs busy and out of boredom, which leads to other habits. There are little to none programs.
So I'm happy that this question got asked. A lot of what I want is, when I talk about reform, some of it is going to be in, expanding education and then also learning valuable life skills like potentially trades. That way, upon release, they have life skills that will be necessary and they'll be able to land a job a lot easier.
Yeah, because it's very hard, with no programming or anything for when they release. They have OCE, which is Oregon Correctional Enterprise, which, is industrial. Most of it's industrial jobs, but not everybody qualifies to go into those jobs. So then you just have, kitchen workers or orderlies that are cleaning up different things around the institution. So that, and then some of the prisons have a college program, but not everybody can get into them. So it's opening doors to a broader audience so that individuals can reform and become better citizens when they release.
Well, and that's, if you're asking me my opinion on the prison system, it needs to be about reform, rehabilitation, not strictly punishment. Yes, that's unfortunately why we're there, but we need to make sure that we are still doing the best for our kids while they're in there, whether it be finishing up education so they can get their GED, not just college stuff, or going back to trades that we're gonna need those jobs in the future because nobody wants to do them.
So Erica comes back and asks if you have read the report about the women's prison and the abuse there at Coffee Creek. There is no oversight.
I actually attended symposium yesterday, and they did mention some of the abuse that happens at Coffee Creek. I am all for accountability at all levels of government, whether it be the top or the bottom. So a lot of those things are just unacceptable, and there needs to be a clear chain of events that happened up to anything. It's like what they used to say back in EMS days, that if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So if somebody comes up with something, you're going to get in trouble if it's not in your report, because it comes back at you. So that accountability just needs to be held across the board. And my thoughts go out to people that have suffered any mistreatment inside the prison system, as we need to make sure that we are caring for the people in our custody.
Yeah. So speaking of that event, were you the only person, only runner there, or was there other people running for governor at the event?
That for the actual, like, candidate wise,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I was the only one, but there were a couple other people, that elected officials that were there. There was a state representative and then also a judge that were there. I can't recall their names off the top of my head. But,
okay.
I didn't see any other gubernatorial candidates there, but there were at least 2 elected officials.
Okay. So Debbie is asking another question. Would you try to get rid of the mandatory minimums, offer reduced time for good behavior? So the mandatory minimum is under the Measure 11 from Kevin Mannix, which is, you do day for day sentences. And that's part of the mass incarceration. Yes.
So I would do my best to get rid of those. I think that they originally, I'm hoping that they came out of a good place, but there are a lot of different factors in every single case. And yes, I think that continuity of sentencing needs to exist, but we also need to trust in, we elect our judges. We have our criminal justice system, and we need to rely on those. And a blanket sentencing policy is not beneficial if it dismisses, other factors.
Yeah. And then we have Erica back again with another question. Would you be open to having directly impacted people help you understand how the prison system needs to change once you're in office?
Of course. I'm big on education and hearing all sides of any sort of matter, because that's ultimately the only way we're going to heal and grow. So I can't just take one person's word for it. I'm somebody that needs to see both and all sides, and think about things heavily before I weigh in on something. So yes, I would encourage people to help me understand how the system needs to change, from either staff members or people who have actually, been incarcerated.
We have a question from Jazzy. How will you implement more trauma-informed training for correctional officers?
How will I do it? Well, probably go back to, the Department of Safety Standards and Training. They need to be on top of that, and then also there can be scheduled trainings a year. There's a lot of different ways we can go about it, but I do agree that training does needs to exist. I know from my personal stint of emergency response, there's a lot of things that you're not necessarily equipped to handle, but you just have to make the best. And in that case, the trauma's there. We just need to make sure that the training is as well.
Another question from Rhonda. How can you make these changes, and how long would it take you if you were elected to office?
Well, quickest way to do it would probably just be, administrative ruling, but if we actually want to see meaningful change, that can be a little bit harder to gauge, especially for locations that are further outside. Like we're talking about, Snake River, where they're hours away from the state capitol, and getting goods and resources will definitely be harder. So that's something to be mindful of, but it's definitely something that's on the forefront of my mind, because my whole entire platform has been about, protecting rights and not losing human decency.
Erica is asking, access to higher education inside prison is getting better, but in some prison there isn't adequate access to computers and information for college. Oh, hold on a minute. We'll get them back.
I think we cut out for a second, but I'm back. Yeah, access to higher education and prison systems better. A lot of that's gonna be ensuring that our prison administrators are actually having people come in and being able to teach people. Like I mentioned, issues where
we'll get him back. He must have some bad connection out there.
So that could definitely be challenging. But still here?
I'm still here. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that. Back to what I was saying. I can restart if you'd like, but location's going to be hard, especially with, if let's say Bolos the city with the indemnities. But there's been a lot of advancements on online school, so that we have that way we can have actually educated folks able to help enhance the education system within a prison.
Yeah, agree. So Debbie is saying for rehab center, what? Oh, here we are. So Debbie is saying for the rehab center, so back to her thing about her husband's cellie being sent to the rehab, they put him on the MOUD, which is the Suboxone program, 2 years before release, and wasn't in there for a drug offense.
All right. When the MOUD, what exactly is that one?
So it's the Suboxone. I don't know the acronyms, but it's the Suboxone program for people that are like methadone, I believe. So it's hold on, I can look it up real quick.
I could do that too. Again, I'm not familiar with that exact case as to why they would be putting.
So it's opioid use disorder.
Okay. Yeah, I can't speak as to why they're putting people on some opioid treatment if that's not something that was needed. So that is a very good question, and that's something that I would really like to get to the bottom of.
Yeah, so I did research on this, and they're giving it to people that are like on life sentences that possibly would never get out of prison. And it just doesn't make sense. I understand using it like in a county jail if the individual is only doing a short period of time, but giving it to individuals that are doing years or life sentences, I just don't get it, because what it brings to my mind is, well, then how are these individuals getting opioids that they need to stay away from?
No, and that's a really good point. If somebody is in there for life with all the regulations that are in place, there should be, no reason to put them on something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it would just go back to parents, prison administration, and kind of get to the bottom of that. That is really good question and a really good point.
Yeah.
Deserves a full investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Because, if people have issues with shoes, then I'm sure that opioids should be a lot higher on that list.
Yeah. Jazzy is asking, if elected, what specific criteria will you require in reviewing clemency applications? Will rehabilitation, time served, and victim support be weighed in a transparent and standardized way?
I can't speak to standardized, but yes, there will definitely need to be ground rules, like the rehabilitation level and how long you've served. And then really the victim support is going to be, I feel like that's probably going to weigh a lot more into place, because we all have to atone for our mistakes and the loved ones that we hurt, but also it's not something that should necessarily affect the rest of your life if you actually are atoning for your mistakes.
Yeah. Next one, Erica. She says, we need more activities for children and access to transportation for them to see their mothers. There is only some visiting times, and most of the time they close visiting due to lack of staff. For example, like planting plants with your mom or making a craft in the visiting. Right now, a 2 to 3 year old has to stay seated for 3 hours without toys and minimum. We need more family activities and support with access to their parents. There is only one woman prison in Oregon and about 15 men's, so the children go to their mothers more.
That's no, I agree. Children need their parents for a healthy development.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. So
Your audio is messing up again, Tristan.
Sorry about that. I'll talk louder. So, yeah, children, they look up to your parents, their parents. They don't. They need them in their lives for a healthy, and even if it's unfortunate that visiting hours and staffing are so limited, and that's something I do want to look into. I came from a single parent household, so I understand the importance of being able to interact with your family. That's needed. It's not fair, especially when the kids are put into a foster system. So thank you for the question, Eric.
Yeah. So to go off of that, I don't know if you've seen or not on like my Facebook or whatever, but DOC did just cut visiting days statewide because of the state funding cut. They had to cut up to 5% of funding, and so instead of finding other avenues to cut funding, they cut visiting days in all prisons.
That's very interesting. I can see other things being cut first. Hours. Maybe there's an additional, oversight with supervision, but I can definitely think of other things that could potentially, be cut opposed to that. So I'm very curious to see how the prison financial system works and actually be able to audit not just them, but the entirety of our state and government agencies, because we do need to be transparent in our spendings and find out what's excessive, see where we can cut.
Jazzy says, will you commit to creating a formal review framework or scoring system so clemency decisions aren't arbitrary or inconsistent? I think this next one goes with it too. It says, what steps will you take to ensure clemency access is equitable for people who can't afford private attorneys or mitigation experts?
So the two parts of the question is, what can I do to make sure, or what will I do to ensure that there is a standardized process, and then also make sure that it's accessible for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. I mentioned transparency. So anytime, if a decision needs to be made, I want to see reasoning, not just why, but I want to hear why not. And if it's something arbitrary, then
he'll be back, hopefully. Thank you guys for being here and participating in this. I'm sorry it's a little mumble jumbled.
All right. Yeah, no, if the reasoning's arbitrary, then it shouldn't have an effect on whether or not clemency is at play. I would definitely be happy to make and score actual guidelines, and then ensuring that it makes that people who can't afford it, it needs to be accessible to everyone. That'll be easier said than done, but I will, even if it's, if it's make forms that are accessible, and then if those forms aren't completed, then that would be another discussion. But no, to find the inner workings of that, I feel like we would need to come up former people in custody, as well as people that are employed in the prison system, where they come together and can voice their frustrations and also work towards a better reform system.
So Jazzy has another question. Senate Bill 819 was designed to expand second chances, but many applications are still being denied. How will you ensure the law is implemented in alignment with its original intent? So I want to say something off of this is also, when I read this, when they first put it out, was that all counties were going to follow the same guidelines of who can and who can't file for Senate Bill 819. But each county is not following the same guideline. Each one is allowing different incarcerated individuals to file differently, and some charges are not allowed to file at all.
I think we would have to start with why they're not following along with that. because if there's barriers that are prohibiting that,
Mhm.
that would be a statewide thing that we would need to address. Uh, because it's one thing if they're not complying willfully versus they're not able to, because it goes back to, we have a lot of systems in place, but a lot of it is more reactive rather than proactive. So we need to make sure that we have the counties aren't just making the rules because they want to, and it's not a they're unable to. Otherwise, that would be good discussions to have with local leaders as to hear their concerns and figure out why exactly they're not following the law.
Mhm. So Iris is asking, what are your views on what prison adults are located at? Currently, adults in custody get no say and end up at prisons extremely far away from relatives, which result in them being unable to be visited from relatives and their support system from being able to also pick them up upon their release, as they are sometimes not moved to a release prison closer to their release address.
I think that I can understand why people just get assigned to prisons, whether it be because of space that's allowed, or maybe that's where the sentencing or the crime was committed. But it should definitely there's a place that if there's an inmate or a family that are involved and want to visit, there should be a process, as well as uh, systems that allow them to at least have somewhat of a say if there's extenuating circumstances. It, there at least needs to be some input, because isolation is really bad on one's mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
if there's family involved, especially let's say if it's a juvenile thing, and then they hit a certain age and they get sent off to another prison. That goes away from the whole rehabilitation thing. And that's not setting people up for success in the future. That's something that we need to change.
Yeah. Debbie is saying, my husband's friend asked for a transfer closer to his family because Snake River is too far for them and they're in bad health, and was denied. Weeks later, his mom passed away. His dad has cancer and could pass any time. Why can they not transfer for family relationships? My husband also put in for a transfer to be closer to his mom because she cannot drive to Snake River because of health reasons. He also was denied. Why are families separated so often?
Well, I don't have a say in how the current system is ran, but I would be curious to know as to. I feel like a lot of that's going to probably be prison policy and not necessarily laws in place. So when I mention, I want to see justification as to why. No, because not just a no. That would help us get a lot more insight with how anything's done versus just a blanket no.
Mm-hmm.
Families need to know, because maybe it's something silly like a paperwork issue, and the no, because I've seen things like that happen. And as long if we're able to accommodate and it doesn't cause unnecessary unnecessary burden. I personally don't have an issue with that. I think it's important for people to be able to be close to their family, especially if they're in poor health or families passing away. It's the punishment is the time in jail or prison.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that we have to treat people like animals.
Yeah. Let's see. We got Priscilla. She is saying, can we discuss the medical aspect? We have some AICs who are given Boxin, which is the Suboxone, then drug tested and thrown into the hole due to a dirty test. Yet, if correctional officers had looked at the chart instead of being power over, they would have seen it was the prison providing that AIC to fall dirty to a test. We also have individuals who have seizures and they get told it's a jail seizure instead of treating the individual. There has also been incidents where blood draws happen and veins collapse, and the staff don't have answers as to what the draw was for. This being said, how do you plan to tackle the medical aspect?
The very last bit of that question cut off.
Um,
But I'm going to speak to.
Are you at the?
What's
Go ahead. You're just breaking up a little bit.
to the okay. Let's see. I was saying the last bit of that question cut off, but I will speak to the whole.
Mm-hmm.
Goes back to justification. If somebody is thrown in there for, it shouldn't be just a catch-all policy that is in place for whether it be, it should be more for protection in immediate danger issues and not a punishment or compliance thing. So I would definitely push to see justification behind why somebody is being put in solitary or the hole, as the question says, because there needs to be a justified reason if we're going to do that. And if somebody's having a dirty test, that to me that raises more questions about the current staff there as to why it was allowed to slip in. That itself would require an entire investigation. And if it was something simple as just looking at medical charts, that oversight needs to be there.
Yeah. So the last part of the question was, we also have individuals who have seizures and they get told it's a jail seizure. Instead of treating the individual, there has also been incidents where blood draws happen and veins collapse. And if staff don't have answers, and veins collapse and the staff don't have answers as to what the draw was for. This being said, how do you plan to tackle the medical aspect?
Well, I that sometimes veins, if you're coming in for an IV, I've seen it happen in the field many times. Staff nodders as to why the draw was done. If there are HIPAA things in place, and maybe some eligible to know why, because they're not authorized representative on somebody's team or a power of attorney. I'm sure that the staff would know as to why they're doing a blood draw. It would just, in my experience, the lack of being able to talk about somebody else's treatment goes down to HIPAA things,
Yeah.
which is
So
the Health Insurance Accountability and Portability Act, if anyone
yeah.
wants to look that up.
So Debbie is asking, officers are bringing in contraband and still not thoroughly checked when entering security. Will this be something you change?
Well, as I've mentioned, accountability and transparency are paramount. So, um, I'm it's contraband just doesn't just show up for no reason. So I can see that it would staff need to be held accountable for their own actions, um, and whether that if something falls through the cracks, people need to know why and not just sweep it under the rug. Because I don't think nobody's above the law.
Yeah. So Michael is asking, would you be open to creating advising positions for ex-AICs to better provide insight from all stakeholders?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I think there needs to be, a committee comprised of both former AICs as well as officials. That way we can actually make meaningful policy adjustments. So yes, I would definitely be willing and open to hearing from former AICs to get that perspective because it's valuable.
Christy wants to know, what are you passionate about? I guess in general.
In general, my biggest passion is serving my community. I recently got injured, so I've had to broaden my horizons and figure out how I can best continue to make those things. I did fire and EMS for a long time, and then I was volunteering also and helping out the community. But then, yeah, I got injured, so I can't really do a lot of that physical type of work anymore. So I'm just I felt like the status quo wasn't working, so my community just got bigger. That's all.
Iris is saying, also with the medical aspect, it isn't required that licensed doctors work at every facility. Medical staff at Deer Ridge regularly tell inmates they faking or just being bullied. They also shut down all the medical other than medication line for all of April, so inmates couldn't access medical care for a month. Statewide, they are regularly denied care based on their release date.
I can see why they don't have an actual licensed doctor at every single facility, but there should definitely be a larger medical oversight. That's even if it's a real thing where a couple times a month a physician comes in or a nurse practitioner or something like that. Although I'm very curious to learn more about uh, medical being shut down for the entire month of April, because that just that doesn't sit well, and I would like to hear the justification behind that process.
I could tell you one, coming from a formerly incarcerated, there was a doctor at OSCI that can't practice on the streets, but can practice in DOC. How does that make sense?
That would be a very good question, because just because of the circumstances, we shouldn't limit who we're allowing to provide care. If we wouldn't have, if it, if somebody's unlicensed, then we wouldn't allow them to care for somebody off the street. We shouldn't be employing them to do that job in a system like, our corrections.
Yeah. Let's see. Iris is saying, as both a victim of crimes and a spouse of an inmate unrelated to each other, there is zero support on both sides. The current system is set up for the sole purpose of putting people in prison and using those people for labor. DOC staff coordinators also get bonuses based on how much money they don't use, so staff are incentivized to find ways to not provide resources for the inmates.
I've seen and heard a lot of things like that happen in the private corporate worlds, and that goes back to, we need to ensure that our people in power, especially boards or commissions, are ultimately responsible to another party and not just an internal one. So there should definitely not be just complete dismissal of resources, and that's not okay. So it goes back to just holding people accountable, including the people who make our rules and policies.
So this one,
go ahead.
So I didn't mean to cut you off. I guess there's a little bit of a delay between me and you. So another one from John is, this one's not prison related, but it still, needs to discuss. What is your plan? What is the plan with school districts? We are currently 47th in the nation.
And that is just embarrassing, unfortunate. A high school diploma used to mean so much, and now it's kind of a participation laughing thing. My plan with school districts is, I want to reinstitute standardized testing, and of course, working on job skills and training, whether it be we elaborate more on how civics work, or go back to plumbing and electrician stuff. We need to give the power back to the teachers and the staff, and then stick to just teaching people facts, as well as when they're older. Of course, I highly encourage independent thinking, but we definitely need to go back to having standards and holding standards, because 47th is ridiculous, and we can do better. We need to do better for our future.
So another one from John is the plan for with fentanyl crisis the state is currently facing. I know it's everywhere. However, the West Coast is very terrible, especially amongst people that are currently homeless.
I'm guessing what the question is, what is the plan for it?
Yeah.
I hate to jump on the recriminalized bandwagon, but when we decriminalize drugs in general, we fail to have the systems in place to offer support. So, it's great that Narcan's easily available to people, but we also need to make sure that we're doing our part. So I don't think that drug addiction is necessarily something to throw you immediately in jail for. It needs to be, we need to have other systems in place, like rehabilitation, and help that we send people to instead of just prison. But I'm all for having those drugs be criminalized again. We can see how I know that my time in EMS, I can see the difference between the response. Now I just walk down the street and I can see people smoking and just no care in the world.
So another one from Erica. Do you believe the primary purpose of prison is punishment or rehabilitation? And how will that belief show up in your policies and budget?
I think it's used punishment, but our primary focus should be rehabilitation. That is all there is with that. How my belief will show up in policies and budget. Um, if we're spending more in unnecessary things, but we could definitely shift that budget into maybe learning new things and giving people access to education and health care or therapy. We shouldn't just forget about the people that we throw in. It's unfortunate that is how things have actually turned out.
Jazzy, we answered that one. He's willing to have formerly incarcerated people on boards. So another one from Erica. What oversight will you implement so prisons are held accountable for neglect or delayed care?
Well, oversight that I will do, like I mentioned, I would like to see them, the board move more towards an independent oversight. And then if things aren't documented or they're denied, I would like to see a full reason as to why and not just swept under the rug. And I would make strict policies as to if denials happened or neglect, the burden should be on the state to prove that.
Another one from John. Is there a way to help people that are incarcerated gain access to stuff like tech and stuff prior to release? And then it goes on, it says, especially those that have been incarcerated for a long period of time.
I'm sure there's ways, yes. And I think it's actually paramount that we do give access to, if we had somebody that went away, let's say in the 90s, they get released now, we rely on technology so much that they might not have seen something like that. So, yes, I think that we need to have those trainings and build the life skills that way we're not just releasing people and throwing them on the street and they have no idea what to do and they feel overwhelmed at the daily life and just have feel like they have to repeat offender and just go back because that's what they know.
Erica is asking, how will you shift correctional staff culture from controlled focus to rehabilitation focused?
A lot of that's going to go back down to, the policies that we have in place, and we need to make sure that whether that means hiring more staff or changing some policies, we need to do better about who we're hiring for jobs, especially if and encouraging compassion. Yes, I am by no means, going to be the one that's necessarily lax on crime. Public safety needs paramount, but we need to make sure that we are employing people that have compassion, and that's really all there is to that.
So another one from Erica. How will you ensure money allocated for rehabilitation actually reaches programs rather than being absorbed into administrative cost?
So that's going to be an issue that's an entire statewide thing. It's not just prison systems. That is why I think all of that should be public information as to where exactly the money's going, and then it needs to be justified why it's spending it. I know that, you know, the lower end of the state, I was never, you know, super high up, but I had to justify why I spent anything or why it costs so much, or, you know, get multiple bids and stuff like that. It, the same level of accountability needs to be across the board, so to be able to the public way if there's no questions as to where our money is going.
So another one, this one's kind of been answered, but it's a little deeper, I guess you would say. Will you include formerly incarcerated people in shaping prison policy? If so, how?
Yeah, I would love to hear perspectives from them, as well as having them sit on boards. Um, there are that people can we they can have ballot measures that enforce us to change our laws, but, you know, I'm genuinely curious to hear more about the life of somebody who's been corrected, and their stories matter. So it's not, you can't make policy that affects someone else's life if you're not willing to hear from the people that have either, you know, been through the system, the process, had the reformation, figure out we need to go to treating the root cause and not just being reactive.
Another one from Erica. How will the public be able to track progress and hold your administration accountable for reform promises?
Well, if I make any rules or policies, I will be posting them and make sure that I'm doing my part to remain accountable to taxpayers. And I fully expect to be held accountable. I think that it's important to have a strong government, but also we need to know and admit when we're messing up. And a lot of times that doesn't seem to happen. So I will make sure that any policies that I make are open. They'll be posted, no questions asked. I'll hold meetings and talk about things. If I'm representing somebody, I can't be afraid of them. I need to actually be there to learn and hear the stories. Otherwise, it's just why do it?
Yeah. One from Jeannie. How do you feel about medical being reformed for adults in prison? I know many people who have passed away because their records were lost, my husband being one of them who almost passed away. There needs to be some accountability, and will that be something that you support? Will you support medical locations in prisons being checked randomly without them knowing somehow? His records were lost twice, therefore he was bleeding for about a year, and they tried to tell him that he already had a colonoscopy, and he had not. This was due to them losing records and mixing records up. This is total negligence.
Um, I definitely think that we need reformation, and like I mentioned earlier, if documents are just vanishing, that is a big no-no, and we need to actually talk to the staff that are involved with that care, because if it's not documented, it didn't happen, and that can mean going back to like the colonoscopy, like where's the record that happens? If it didn't happen, if it's not, there's no record of it, then we need to actually treat these concerns. And uh, it, I've definitely I know that private healthcare can be a challenge, so I can only imagine how much more difficult it is with the correction system.
So Iris is saying, I have power of attorney and my spouse has allowed release of info and been told they can't tell me anything medical. They just don't want to admit they messed up. So when you're in DOC, you can do a release of information through medical, or you can get power of attorney to a family member or somebody that you're close with. So what I think what she's saying is that they're still, even though he signed the release of information, they're still not telling her anything medical related.
That's good to know. I would definitely make sure that you have copies of those forms and be willing to show them. I'm just going to hope that it's a new staff member or something. They should definitely have records of those. So your name comes up, they should see that you're someone that is able to hear about medical concerns. But just to be safe, I would definitely carry that forward. But no, it's not okay.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, but that's not okay. Go ahead to the next question.
Okay. Debbie's saying the medical at Snake River is not very sanitary either. When they do their group shots, they don't change gloves between shots. Will you have oversight on what medical is doing?
Seeing as it's over in Snake River,
yeah,
probably not personally, but I am all for creating third-party boards and commissions that ensure that proper medical care is happening, and that's something that I take to heart, is ensuring that people's rights and liberties aren't being violated. So access to medical care is something that's on that list.
Iris is saying they claimed the reason for shutting down medical was because they needed an entire month to convert the paper files to electronics and train the staff off-site how to use the electronic system, which somehow took 30 days. So DOC still uses, was using paper files, so you can't read their chicken scratch. So it's been in the making since like 2015 of transferring over to electronic files, so that it's easier to communicate with like outside doctors onto the inside if you're like sent to the hospital or something. That's a weird reason to shut down, though. Jeez.
That is very interesting, because just reading it from that way, it sounds like something that a couple different mandatory staff meetings might have solved at different points in time. I know that I've been in situations where if I don't redo my bloodborne pathogens or HIPAA training, I just get taken off the schedule.
So Iris is also saying, to elaborate on licensed staff, they aren't required to have all staff licensed either. This is the reason for so many malpractices and basic hygiene and safety issues, as well as lack of care. One nurse at Deer Ridge stated in an interview she learned her skills with how to treat AICs by telling her diabetic sister, not implying she likes to control them. Oh. Well,
they're anytime we're having somebody doing cares, we need to have oversight, a chain that people report to that are I know that sometimes we might have, even in our nursing homes, caregivers that aren't necessarily licensed, but they report to people that are licensed and there's a lot of policies in place. So I think it would just be a matter of ensuring that that same structure is formed within the system.
We got a new person. Dirk is saying someone who has been locked up can really help change the way people are treated when released and to find programs to help them become better citizens. Medical reform needs to be looked at very seriously. Sometimes people don't get the proper medical care when locked up. Agree.
Yeah, of course. And that's no one's going to have the insight that somebody who's actually dealt with the issues. So I'm all for hearing perspectives like that. And then medical reform, yes, no, everybody should have access to healthcare, especially with, something that's essential like insulin or having access to insulin injections. So,
Dirk's
I appreciate that call.
Dirk is also saying the system needs more people who were locked up to give their voice.
Nope, that's definitely true. I know that, like I said, I'm willing to hear the perspectives and have these hard conversations. I know that not everyone is, but hopefully we can foster an environment where people feel like they can come forward with their concerns. They're not going to be retaliated against.
Yeah. Erica says, on day one after release, can we get every person immediately connected to a paid peer support mentor with lived experience who can help them secure essentials like housing, ID, food, and healthcare, not just referrals? And how will you fund and sustain that system statewide? It would change lives and create jobs for incarcerated families to succeed.
Honestly, that sounds like an amazing idea. Being able to have somebody to report to and talk to on a peer level rather than just having a probationary officer that's kind of your point of contact and lifeline into the world. Depending on how we're funding, prison systems and stuff, I can definitely see that being it was mentioned earlier, about making money with putting people to work and whatnot. I feel like a lot of those, whether it be a government grant or labor, part of that should definitely go into paying for the peer support and better conditions and quality and equipment and medical.
So Erica is going on to that as well. It says, I work as a case manager for the county as someone who is priority incarcerated and became peer support certified to work with women coming out.
Good. That's definitely needed. I wouldn't make a very good peer support person because I haven't been involved in the corrections department. My experience there would be very limited, and the times I've actually been inside is essentially just been led to a certain room, escorted out. So I'm glad to see that there are peer support people in place. And I would love to see more.
Dirk says the court system needs to be reformed.
Yeah, I think we've touched on that one.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be reformation. And people need to be held accountable. Would ensure that judges need the ability to be able to look into all factors of things and not just be necessarily have their hands tied for any and every case.
Yeah. One last one on the chat is a massive issue with denials of care is due to the fact that anything beyond basic medication requires it to be presented to a committee, and it is highly unlikely to be approved. And then if you are within 2 years of releasing, it is basically a 0% chance you will get approved for any medical procedures. So within DOC, they have a committee. It's called a therapeutic level of care. And once a week or once a month, however often they want to do it, they take, depending on what it is going on, and they can't give you the care on the inside. They take it to this committee, and then this committee decides who gets approved to go out and who has to deal with that medical condition until, if it gets denied again and again, then they have to go through the appeal or the grievance process. If the grievance is denied, then they got to go through the grievance appeal. If those are all denied, it leads to a tort claim, which is a lawsuit on the Department of Corrections.
So, is there a question in this particular comment? But
it's just say
it's good information to have.
Yeah, it just says that a massive issue is denials is due to the fact that anything beyond basic medication requires to go to a committee.
Well, like I said, things that I would like to see is a reasoning behind a no and not just a no.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would probably stop a lot of no's if they have to justify why not.
Yeah.
Because if it's just I can say no and that's that, there is a lot less scrutiny. But if I have to say I said no because this, that's going to draw a lot more attention if it's not for a good reason.
So one last information is from Erica. She says all inmates can get the certification and be trained online with the payment, but the problem is people don't have the money or technology to become peer support certified. But if there was a program that could start, it would change many aspects of release. So that's just going off of her previous comments.
Yeah. No, and that would be. I know there's a lot of nonprofits and foundations that specialize in these sort of things. They might have better insight as to routes and revenues into providing funding for getting people to be peer support certified. But I'm all for it. I feel like if you've learned something while you're there and you can reach out to people that they were in your shoes once upon a time or you were in theirs, that's going to be the best support somebody can offer. It's somebody who actually knows what you're going through. I'm all for the programs. It would just be a matter of finding funding and justifying.
Yeah. Okay, Tristan, I appreciate your time. We're just over an hour. Is there any last words that you want to say to everybody on socials and your personal plugs if you want?
No, I'm just I'm thankful to be here, and I'm happy to have heard from everybody, and whether it be questions about my beliefs or my policies, but the informational comments were the value behind those were astronomical. There'll be something thinking about in the days to come.
Well, I appreciate you, Tristan, and wishing you the best on your campaign. Hoping you make it through to the election in November.
Yes, thank you about that. Primaries have definitely been an educational. It's been a process.
Yeah, of course.
definitely been eye-opening. So I look forward to continuing on to serve my community.
Yes. Alrighty, Tristan. Well, you have a good night, and thank you for joining us. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Stephen, for hosting this.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Thank you guys for being here. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on socials. And I'm glad that you guys came. Have a good night, everybody.